Okay, welcome back, everybody, to the Selling Fort Collins podcast. I am here with the president and CEO of the Fort Collins Chamber of Commerce, Ann Hutchison. Ann, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, Greg.
Yeah, we're going to go over lots of stuff today, but we met back in 2013 when I was in the Leadership Fort Collins program. We might get into that a little bit, but before we do, tell us a little bit about your responsibilities, your role as the president and CEO.
Yeah, so I've had the great pleasure to be president and CEO of the Chamber since January of 2021. I came through COVID as a pretty big player throughout our community as far as advocating for business, really identifying ways for business to survive during COVID. And we were in a leadership transition, and our board of directors saw value in what I had brought to the community and moved me into that role. And in that role, I'm the chief strategy officer, face of, and biggest business advocate of our membership.
Wonderful. Let's dive into that a little bit. Let's talk about COVID.
Yes.
I hadn't even thought about that, diving into that during this conversation. But one thing that stands out to me as a really interesting thing about our community, a unique thing about Fort Collins, is that, people really interact. There is a real community here. In fact, just today was actually a normal morning. I received a text from a good friend who owns an architecture firm in Old Town. I just finished reading, a great book you recommended. Do you have any more recommendations? I texted him some books. I got 2 additional text messages from other business owners who want to join my pickleball league. People talk, people interact, people hang out, very tight-knit community. So how did that show itself during COVID? And tell us about how that was during that kind of scary time for everybody and how the chamber was involved.
Yeah. So we were in a very special position because of our work as an organization. We had already built a lot of relationships with city government, county government, with our business leaders. We had connections into the state. We had insights into the health department. We had strong connections with many of our healthcare providers in Fort Collins and in the area. And so with that relationship building already fully underway and in many ways cemented, we were in a pretty exciting spot. And it's terrible to say exciting with COVID, but we were in a special position to be able to make sure parts of our ecosystem knew what the other parts were doing. And very few individuals and organizations in Northern Colorado were prepared or ready to do that. So we could very quickly be the voice that was working with the state in the moment that they were going to change a rule. And they decided at 2:00 on a Friday to roll out a new rule at 5:00 that same Friday. We were in a very special position to be able to share unintended consequences, make sure that we were able to communicate directly to business so that they could react very well, and just really be that network that allowed for business to survive some really challenging decision points that they had to face.
Yeah, it's probably safe to say you started out in this new role with the Chamber of Commerce because, some people might not know you were involved with the Chamber of Commerce for many years as the executive vice president.
Yes.
You took on this role as president and CEO, and the degree of difficulty right out of the gates, 10 out of 10.
Yes. It certainly was a new experience for everyone in the world. And again, we were up for the challenge, and again, very honored actually to be that business advocate, to be that connector, to be that person that could really, that person and that organization that could make a difference. Yeah.
Well, I think you're the right kind of person to lead.
Oh, thank you.
During that time.
Thank you.
I can't imagine anybody better. Just strength, also empathy.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about you before we dive into the chamber more. Background, where did you grow up and what kind of things were you into growing up?
So I was born here in Fort Collins, but grew up on the eastern plains of Colorado. My dad was a higher ed executive, so he started out at Colorado State, but then plugged into the community college system. So we were nomads for a little bit and then landed in Brush, Colorado, is what I consider to be my my hometown. My mom was a teacher, so that made they were a perfect duo to be able to do that. Loved growing up in a small rural town. We were city kids in an ag town, so we never had animals or were a part of a farm, but we were part of that agricultural community. And I thank my lucky stars every single day that I got to grow up there. Certainly gave me a grounding in work hard, show up, be a part of a community, be a leader in a community. So again, I'm so thankful to have that background. I went to the University of Northern Colorado and graduated from there with a dual degree in communications and then journalism and mass communications. So how you talk as well as what you should talk about. Ended up after graduating in an economic downturn, I ended up in Garden City, Kansas, and took a job that I never knew that I would love as much as I did. I worked for Kansas State University and Finney County, Kansas. I was a 4-H agent under the banner of K-State. So for 5 years, I did leadership training, took kids to camp, created in-school programs. Again, I still can't believe somebody paid me to load kids up on a bus, take them to camp, teach them how to sing fun songs, get along with each other and bring them back.
You're super into sports now too. Yeah, when I am on social media, I always see you. I don't think there's a larger supporter of CSU sports. You're at it seems like you're at every game, or were sports a part of you growing up? Was that-
They were, yes. So I played volleyball and basketball in high school, considered for half a second playing at a small junior college or a small Division III school, but decided that really wasn't my opportunity. Wasn't really that good, but I sure did love being a part of a team. So yes, big part of playing as I grew up, and then just being a sports fan. I'm a total Colorado junkie. So I cheer. When I say we, I mean my sister and I. We cheer for the Rockies, we cheer for the Broncos, we cheer for the Nuggets, and absolutely adore our Colorado State Rams.
Yeah, you do. And I think that's something we haven't talked about a lot in the show with other guests so far. It's that, you can walk to the stadium. For Colorado State football, it's on campus. Yes. Of course, the basketball is on campus there too. Yeah. The women's volleyball team is amazing. Yeah. Like just this incredible powerhouse of a team that's incredibly entertaining to watch. Yeah. And the litmus test is, we took our 5 and 6 year old to see a game and they were just like actually enthralled.
Oh yes.
Like the entire game. So really, really exciting. So what's, do you have a favorite? Like tell us what that's, you make it to all the games. Yeah. What's your favorite? So
it's a really tough call. Absolutely adore our CSU women's volleyball team. We have the 6th best attendance record in the country when it comes to women's volleyball.
That's a great stat.
So we're filling Moby Arena with upwards of 5,000 people on a very regular basis. And we have this long coaching history of success, which makes it equally fun to cheer for. At the same time, again, because I played basketball, I have a great passion for collegiate basketball. And so following the men's and the women's teams is a lot of fun too.
Right. Especially lately.
Yes. It's been a very exciting brand of basketball in Fort Collins lately.
Last
for
year
sure.
Was amazing.
It was a fun run.
It was absolutely packed. Great. And hopefully better times ahead for football.
Yes.
We'll see. It seems like it's going in the right direction.
Right.
So that's great. Yeah. And, going back to the, you grew up, your first job is one of my questions. We talked about that, but how did you then get to Fort Collins, get involved with the chamber? Because that was a while back.
Yeah. So worked for K-State for 5 years. Then I decided that I either needed a master's degree, which K-State would pay for, but then they would want 5 more years of my life, or I could change jobs. At that point, I had decided I actually fell in love with Southwest Kansas. So, again, that agricultural hometown, small, show up, work hard mantra was a part of living in Garden City. So I worked for an accounting firm for another 6 years and was their first marketing coordinator, helping accountants figure out how to find business, keep business, grow business, and working with their leadership team. At a certain point there, unfortunately, I lost my mom and decided that I could only do that long distance care for a family member once in my life, and made a very specific effort to come back to Colorado, and landed at the chamber. It was a complete moment of circumstance that
why
landed me
Fort
there.
Collins? I mean, why the chamber in Fort Collins?
Yeah. So the rest of my family had already made it back to Fort Collins. So my folks were here. My sister was here. I had an aunt and a grandma here in Fort Collins. It was a place that was thriving. And
what year was this?
So this was 2003 when I came back, and I landed at the chamber again, total happenstance. I was the policy committee coordinator. We don't even have that job anymore at the chamber. And I thought, well, I'll work at the chamber for a year. I'll get to know the business community. I'll find my real job by hanging out at the chamber. And it turns out the chamber was another one of those fantastic organizations that I never knew that that's where I would want to spend my entire career. So I had the great opportunity to work with leadership programs, the one that you mentioned that you went through, Greg, with me, as well as hundreds of other community members over the years. But I got to own and grow and lead that program. I got to work in policy. I've always been a bit of a policy wonk, and I got to lead in that area on behalf of the business community. So first couple of years was very much in the weeds, kind of doing the things, figuring out who I was, and then got promoted to executive vice president about 3 years into my time at the chamber.
So about 2006.
Yes.
Okay. And then
Yes.
2006 to all the way to 2021.
Yes.
Okay. That's when you became president and CEO. Is the Leadership Fort Collins program around anymore?
Is
that still going?
Absolutely. We just
Haven't kept
graduated. Yeah, we just graduated another 34 folks back in May, and the program's been around now for 40 years, which is very cool. Yes.
If you're listening to this,
Yes.
and you live in Fort Collins, you're a member of the business
Yes.
community in Fort Collins, apply. I had such a great experience. I made friends
I'm so glad.
in 2013 that in fact, one I met with yesterday, talked with yesterday. So amazing way to form relationships, amazing way to learn about the city, all the workings. You do an incredible job.
Well,
with that.
thank you. Thank you. It really has been just this very cool way to introduce new folks to their community. But my greater ahas are people that have either grown up here or grew up and then returned. And the moment where you just see their eyes open to, oh my gosh, this is my community. That's one of those moments that I cherish every time it happens.
This is how it's evolved.
Yeah, exactly. But as well, just that, I didn't know that about my town. I didn't know that about my community.
You maybe take for granted.
For sure. And the number of folks that I've had go through the program that had an aha moment that changed their trajectory has been super cool as well. Helping people to find their spot. Yeah.
So many people that will listen to this they live here. We talked a little bit before we started, the audio on it's people who live here. They want to learn more about their community. There are also so many more people from outside of this market that are curious about Fort Collins, want to learn more about it. So, when you think about what's different about Fort Collins, what are some of the things that are different? And then the follow to that is, what's the comp? I've heard people say that, Fort Collins is like Austin, Texas, maybe 25 years ago. I've heard other comparisons. Do you have any comparisons? Because I know you've traveled, you've seen a lot of things, and I would imagine in your role as president and CEO, you're probably communicating with other city leaders, other presidents and CEOs of other chambers. And I just wonder if there's any comp, like where is Fort Collins going? That's always what I'm curious about.
Oh my gosh, that's such a great question. And I like to remind people that Fort Collins is no longer a small agrarian town that is completely dependent upon Colorado State, nor are we a metropolitan area like a Denver. We're somewhere in between, which makes us a very interesting and exciting community. We're a bit of a teenager, and we're going through some growing pains. We're trying to figure out, what do we do with housing? We're trying to figure out, who are we are we willing to let go of some of this local control on behalf of a larger region? And so that moment of being a teenager city is, I think, very exciting.
What does that mean to you? Letting go of some of that local control. I'm curious about that.
Well, I have to remind people when they come to our community that, again, we look like a growing city, and we absolutely are a growing city, but we're still this small town. And relationships matter. People matter. Taking care of your neighbor still matters. So in that teenagerdom, it's acknowledging that there's great value in relationships, but there's also then a little bit of a letting go to make space for the next big thing.
I like that. Yeah. I've never heard that before. I think that's great.
Well, and we're here in downtown, and just looking out your window, I can see a little more density, right? We're growing up a little bit higher. We're growing a little bit more bulky on a block. That's a good thing, because that can coexist right next door to a classic bungalow that someone has taken care of for years. And all of that can coexist if we let ourselves make space for that.
Well, that's interesting. I remember this project that you're pointing to across the street. I'm involved in that with other partners and one of the investors there. And in getting that going off the ground, there were some amazing people, the Brinkmans that really led that. And other partners, I think there were people who just didn't see that vision.
Right.
To your point, they couldn't really let go of what Fort Collins used to be.
Right.
See where Fort Collins was going. And some people who could.
Yeah.
And when you see that thriving, when you see the line for Little Man ice cream going around the block, and the people and the kids and the family-friendly atmosphere, you see that, Fort Collins was ready for that.
Yes.
And that's where it's going. This is one of the best downtowns in the country.
Yeah.
Without question.
Well, and you asked a little bit about comps, and it's really hard to say Fort Collins is equal to someone else. But I will say, as an economic development community, we've spent time visiting aspiring communities that we want to be like. And we had this fantastic trip a number of years ago to Minneapolis, St. Paul.
I didn't know this.
Yeah.
When was this? How many years ago?
Oh gosh, it was pre-COVID.
Okay.
And we took probably 30 of us as economic developers that existed here in Northern Colorado. And I was just so struck by how, again, mostly a city, but with a lot of small town roots, and a city that, again, was experiencing a little bit of what we are. Big, beautiful, historic, crazy historic buildings right next to their new football stadium that's nothing but glass and shine and chrome, and how well those two things coexisted. It was incredibly energizing to be able to see that, yes, you can have all of that in a single space. Again, Minneapolis ended up being super fascinating because of the university. And again, a university that was no longer the heart and soul of their economy, but certainly a key partner in the economy.
Certainly a key partner, right? Because, what do amazing, thriving, growing companies need? They need talent.
Yes.
And so
they need talent, they need IP, they need inspiration. And
there's a different type of energy.
Yeah.
It's funny, we always say there's cities, but we call them college towns.
Yes.
There's a different type of energy, though.
Absolutely.
Like they have that. I know what you mean. I hadn't thought of that as a comp, but absolutely, it makes sense.
So Minneapolis, St. Paul, we did a trip to Salt Lake City. I will also say, again, a community that's had some really big money flushed into it because of the Olympics, because of their dedication to technology, but also the university sits right in the center. And there's something about that. We did a trip to Austin. Again, a very similar vibe of small town, agricultural roots, a university, and oh, by the way, we're growing this city right in the middle of it all.
With Austin, you look at the healthcare sector, you look at, obviously the university, the largest public university in the state, and the
technology,
tech sector. The tech sector.
Huge.
I think that's where the comp comes from with Austin.
Yes.
Now, Austin has over 1 million people.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's very dense. Traffic's horrible.
Yeah.
Which is maybe one good reason to go there. I don't know that people in Austin thought Austin would ever be what it is.
Correct.
And there was planning and road. It seems to me, having made several trips to Austin, that like these roads are for like Fort Collins.
Yes.
But there's 1 million people here.
Yes.
And it's absolutely bonkers trying to get around town.
And again, going back to this teenager analogy, they are struggling with some of those infrastructure transportation decisions. I was just there for a conference, and their planning department had a 20-hour meeting to decide if they were going to change their land use code to allow for a mass transit project to add on to the mass transit that they already have in Austin. 20 hours. Yeah.
Wow.
Over the course of 2 days. So again, and that's really kind of a teenager moment of how do I let go of those things of the past in order to make room for the things of the future? And when do they align and when do they not? And how does our community feel about it? Again, I've been fascinated with that. And then I bring that same observation back here to Fort Collins on a regular basis. Yeah.
I think about that, and I think about some of these places we're mentioning, and what does it look like in 25 years? Maybe a lot more similar to these places than we realize.
Yes, I think so.
And I kind of come back, and I'm curious to your take, because I think by this point we've established that this is, if you're listening, this is somebody you should be listening to, everybody on this particular topic. What about the next 5 to 10 years? Because I think it's challenging for a lot of people to think 25 years out. However, the next 5 to 10 years,
yes,
very applicable. What are a few changes, a few ways the city will evolve? Any concerns you have, any hopes you have for where the city is at in 5, 10 years? Like, let's say you leave, you come back in 5, 10 years. What do you think? What do you think is different if you're going to just, you have a crystal ball?
Yeah. I think we have a handful of challenges that, depending on what path we choose, will decide who we are in 5 to 10 years.
Which one of those?
Well, I'll start with housing. We as a community have always really been ahead of the pack when it came to housing. In fact, we talk a lot in our history about, it used to be if there was a job in Denver that was identical to a job in Fort Collins, you would see a 20% salary discount for that job in Fort Collins, because housing was so readily available and a high quality product that was easy to access. That gap has eliminated. And choices we make about how we increase the supply of housing in Fort Collins for all levels of income will decide who we are. If we choose to make changes to some of our land use codes, if we choose to embrace density, if we choose to create products that can serve, again, a cross-section of our community. And when I say a cross-section, I mean we need housing for people that are making minimum wage. We also need housing for the multi-million-dollar CEO, and we need all of that in between right here in Fort Collins. If we choose to lean in and say, yes, we are dedicated to bringing more housing to our town, I think we will look a lot like a Minneapolis, a lot like a Salt Lake City. We'll continue to have that thriving, energetic community. We could also make some choices like we've seen Boulder make, where they, as a policy, said, we're not interested in growing any new housing. In fact, we're going to, in many ways, build a moat around our community, and we're going to have people live outside and drive in, work, and then leave. And check out how their downtown is doing right now.
It's interesting you say that. I was having lunch with somebody last week.
Yeah.
And they hadn't been to Pearl Street in many years. They went to college at the University of Colorado. And I mentioned to them, I said, look around. We were in Old Town. I said, look around. This is thriving.
Yes.
And I mean, clearly, I was pointing out the obvious. I said, go to Boulder right now.
Yes.
I don't have the stats on Boulder. However, I do know walking down, I'm just saying, vacancy after vacancy after vacancy. And you know what it felt? It felt real quiet.
Yes.
It felt real quiet.
Downtown Fort Collins, we're talking about a 2% vacancy relative to our retail spaces, to our main street spaces. Boulder is looking at 29% vacancy along Pearl Street.
Wow. So there's the stat.
There's a huge stat. And how does that then relate to the energy of a community? That heartbeat, who are we? What are we doing? There's a vibe. And we've been again, Fort Collins has been so fortunate to have super smart, caring, empathetic leaders that have positioned us to be this just thriving metropolis. And we've got a handful of decisions moving ahead that will either decide if we stay on that path or we veer off it.
Well, to layer some stats into that too, I'll tell you that, currently talking about the housing inventory, we were at 2.5 months of inventory. A balanced market, everybody, is 6 months of inventory between buyers and sellers. So, 2.5 months is still way in the seller's market territory. So that keeps prices really elevated and really affects affordability. You go back to the crazy times, some of those times in 2021.
Yes.
We were at 0.5 months of inventory, half a month of inventory.
Yeah,
That's
15 days.
The bidding wars, planning on going $100,000 over asking, those half a month inventory. So, in my career, I started in 2005. We had times where we got up to 17 and a half months of inventory.
Yes.
And, so very different now. So I think that's a really interesting challenge. Mm-hmm. That's what everybody is talking about here, affordability and where that goes and what decisions will be made. So, I guess to be continued there. Are there any specific actions that you think could be taken or should be taken, or that, the chamber is maybe supporting or pushing?
Yeah. So we've been heart and soul and central to the housing conversation for about 18 months and have been strong proponents of changing land use codes. Let's knock down some of the barriers that are in place that are adding to the cost of pulling a house out of the ground. We've been very curious about some of the philosophy of groups like Strongtown and YIMBY as far as
groups? I'm not familiar with
them. So Strongtown is a national footprint organization. It's grassroots and top down that challenges perspectives of communities. And Strong Towns is saying, let's go back to basics. Let's make it possible for you, Greg, if you've got an empty lot next to your house, to become a developer and put a couple houses on there. Let's have you create community, not this national government conglomerate kind of building of housing, which is super fascinating. Yeah. It's all about give it back to the people.
I'm Googling.
Yeah, right. You should absolutely check it out. And again, I'm not a full buy-in on every one of their philosophies, but again, I'm super curious about this idea of, can we get back to creating community the way that we did after World War II? Can we get back to that sense of ownership of a community, which aligns very, very well with a lot of the values we have here in Fort Collins.
It's interesting. Yeah, I don't know that. I would, I'd like to. I've just never heard about this organization.
Oh, yes.
I need to Google. I don't know that I'd be 100% in line with everything, but super curious to learn more about that. And the other one you mentioned.
Yes, YIMBY. Yes, in my backyard. So, unfortunately, we've been a little bit challenged in making change here in Fort Collins because people really do adore a community. They adore a community the day that they move in, and they don't want it to change very much from that moment.
Sure. And
so we sometimes call those folks NIMBYs, not in my backyard. YIMBY is an effort that says, you got to come in, now make room for the next person to come in. Say yes to the project next door. Say yes to the group of apartments down the street. Say yes to things happening in your backyard instead of saying no.
This is really good. I'm having a lot of fun. How much time do we have today? How long can I keep you?
We'll you're hitting the nerd button on me, so I'm happy to talk policy and wonky stuff all day long.
We got a couple of nerds here. This is great. Interesting. So
Yeah.
okay, so
housing. I think
the big one.
I think it's a really big
Affordability.
one. Affordability.
And inventory, because I think really what you're getting at, when people are talking about affordability, like it's supply and demand.
It is.
Is we have. There's so many people. The figures. Over 4,000 people, I think, moving to Larimer County every year. Certainly, a lot of those are clearly going to Fort Collins.
Yes.
Not very many homes being built. Inventory has been low for a long time, and there is no end in sight of that. So that is the real, $1 million question when it comes to affordability: is what will happen, what can happen with inventory, and you're a proponent of, basically making it a bit easier to add more inventory, for across the spectrum.
And if we're not going to make changes to policy or remove barriers to building more supply within our city boundaries, what are we going to do to think about housing from a regional perspective? Right now, we have a number of people that are landing in Severance. And that's where they're able to find a home that fits with their economic demands and still maintains a travelability in the region that makes sense. What are we doing as a city of Fort Collins to make sure transportation, which is probably the single biggest barrier to a family getting to work and back, what are we doing to make sure that those systems work really well for that family? What are we doing to bring along transit and transit that makes sense? What are we doing to make sure roadways have been expanded appropriately to maintain that intersection of a region, which is what we are? So we spent a lot of time talking about Fort Collins, but that's another really big decision point for us is, are we going to be Fort Collins or are we going to be a region? And I think we're going to be a region.
Without question, I think we're going to be a region. The question is, what type of a region?
Yes.
The question is, are you going to be stuck in bottleneck traffic for 47 minutes?
Correct.
To get to Severance someday.
Yes.
And
And if we don't make the infrastructure investments we should, it will.
And how does the chamber exert influence, control? How do they push on that with the city?
Yeah. So we're spending a lot of time, again, relationship. So we're spending time with elected and appointed officials, making sure that they understand when you say no to a road, you're saying yes to worse environmental protections. When you say no to a house, you're saying yes to a transportation challenge in front of you. So it's our job to be a partner, an educator, and a connector. And we're doing that not only with elected and appointed officials in Fort Collins, but we're doing it with those same people across the region. We mentioned earlier the fact that you went through Leadership Fort Collins. We as chamber, so the Fort Collins, Loveland, and Greeley Chamber, came together about 15 years ago and said, we're really struggling to have connections across the region. And we launched Leadership Northern Colorado, a 6-month educational program designed to take 30 people from the region through a learning experience of, here's what it looks like, and here's how you make decisions in a regional context versus a community context.
Getting them out of the silo.
Yes, exactly. So again, we're hoping to inspire more and more of our community to be thinking about those big regional questions, but also then spending a lot of time locally to help inspire that regional conversation.
What I like about that approach is that, there's different ways to influence or try to, guide to the outcome that, you believe in or are really rooting for. And seems that the route you are taking is just really trying to educate.
Yes.
Just really trying to inform.
Yes.
And then let the people in their elected positions or their hired positions make those decisions.
Correct.
But do everything you can so that they are informed, educated decisions.
Absolutely.
And I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's exciting to me to hear some of these things. Going back to the business community in Fort Collins, we've talked about COVID and all of those things. How has the chamber evolved? How has the business community evolved?
Yeah.
Here? When I walk around town, as you do, you see we are it was, as we mentioned earlier, one of the most thriving downtowns.
Yes.
Old Town Fort Collins is incredible. The coffee shops, the lunch spots, the brunch spots, the dinner spots, the ice cream, the breweries. Of course, it's all here.
Yeah.
So we know a lot about Old Town, but the overall business community, how has that evolved and how has that changed since COVID, just the last 2 years?
Well, we started the conversation with Colorado State. We are so fortunate to have that single largest employer in Northern Colorado in our backyard. They're employing 5,000 individuals between staff, faculty, support services. So 5,000 people depend upon that organization day in, day out to, again, create that amazing retail space that's a secondary use of our dollars. And in addition to just being a sizable employer that's churning out some great product, right? We're taking 18-year-olds, we're bringing them to Fort Collins, we're learning them up, and then hopefully we're turning them out into the workforce world.
And they're staying here now.
Yes, exactly, which is super fun as well.
No one talks about that. They're actually staying here. And it's been happening for a while, but it did not used to be the case.
Yes.
Like 10 years ago, it was like, well, where am I going?
Yes.
Fort Collins, not on the radar.
Exactly.
They're staying here now. They want to stay here now.
Yeah. So they're churning out great product, and they're churning out some of the most cutting edge solutions to the challenges that face us as a country. Colorado State had almost $500 million worth of research activity on campus in 2023.
Wow.
Yeah. And we're only 5 years away. 5 years ago, we were just cresting over $400 million worth of activity. So we continue to see this economic churn that comes out of Colorado State that then adds to the other industries that are really thriving here in Northern Colorado. Technology. We continue to have all of the bigs have a presence here in Fort Collins. You have Intel, you have AMD, you have HP and HP Inc., you have Broadcom. Very technology-based. Microsoft, exactly.
They're hiding up there.
Yeah, they are. They're hiding.
Signs. They don't have any signs.
We've got a small outlet of Google. So all of the bigs are here, but sometimes they're below the radar, but they're here because their peers are here and Colorado State is here. So technology continues to be this thriving industry. We're seeing some incredible momentum starting to build behind climate solutions. So we've got the powerhouse here in Fort Collins that's directly related to Colorado State. Powerhouse is now doubling in size, and we've been the fortunate receivers of a federal grant here at the Innosphere, our technology advancer, and climate solutions is going to be the heart and soul of that work. So again, we're going to hopefully, I'll knock on the little piece of wood here. Hopefully, we're going to end up with the answers to what do we do with climate change. How do we survive? How do we modify? What's the business solution to climate change? Those ideas are being explored right here in Fort Collins. It really gets exciting fast.
When you drive by that powerhouse facility, just right on the Poudre River there on the edge of Old Town, it looks amazing. I'm learning a lot today. I had no idea that was the basis of what they were doing there. You can just tell from looking at the building.
Yes.
It's important things.
Yes.
When people are talking about the university and research, oftentimes they think, well, it's just the CSU vet school. It's, the veterinary school is incredible.
Yes.
It's world famous.
Second best in the country.
And it's fluctuated a little bit over the past 20 years. 1 and 2.
One and two.
My sister's a graduate. My sister's, she's gone on to do incredible things and credits. Now she comes back to CSU to speak every once in a while.
Oh, I love that.
And, so people just think that it's all the vet school. And the vet school is amazing, but all these other things, climate change.
Yes.
And, it's a really big deal.
Yeah.
Total sidebar, but this is just, are you aware of the celebrity sightings in Fort Collins over the past several years? I follow on Facebook to see, but load me up on some of those. Well, I'm going to give you a few. This would have been, probably 5-6 years now, but we had Arnold Schwarzenegger in town.
Okay. Yes.
And I think I was the first person to run into him early that morning.
I love it.
We ran into each other at Sierra Trading Post.
Nice.
And I tried to get my picture with him.
Well done.
He said no.
Okay. Well,
but it was neat seeing him. And then, Emilio Estevez, Kevin Bacon, Those are a few. David
Nice.
Letterman.
Oh, for sure.
David Letterman brought his dog to the CSU vet school, as many famous, well-known people do. They fly in just to see the amazing specialists at the CSU vet school.
And you don't have to be rich and famous to access the CSU vet school.
Key point.
That's the other part of, again, growing metropolis, but still a small town that is about relationships and is about, if my cat Sheldon got sick, I know I can just take him right over there to the vet school and have the very best of the universe in my backyard.
We've taken our dogs there so many times, and it truly is the best of the best. It's something that shouldn't be taken for granted. But, you just kind of a sidebar, going back to CSU
Yes.
and just going back to all the amazing things. You mentioned 5,000 people employed.
Yes.
You mentioned some of these other companies. Like, what other ones are growing? You mentioned some of the tech companies, but, Woodward Governor is a huge one in town that I don't think enough people talk about,
Correct.
realize the impact.
Yes.
They have this amazing international campus that borders Old Town, a former city golf course on the east side.
Yes.
And, what about them? Like, what's the news on them? I'm just curious where they're named.
Well,
not enough people talk about it.
They continue to double down on Fort Collins. We have been incredibly fortunate to have a long history of Woodward being here in Fort Collins. And for your listeners that don't know, they started out as an engine control company. So you'll hear about classically, there's a governor on an engine that will only allow it to run so fast and so hard. That was their long-time history, but Woodward over the last 20 years has really focused in on not only engine controls, but as somebody pointed out, they help things to fly. So you can't climb on an airplane anywhere in the world that doesn't have Woodward parts on it. So they're figuring out ways for things to work better, faster, stronger. And again, all things relative to flight. They also then work in that oil and gas industry, really trying to come up with solutions that make energy management more efficient. So the less oil and gas that we release into the air, the more that can stay in the pipe, the more it can get to that final destination of making your lights turn on. They're a part of that solution to, again, protect our environment while helping business to be more efficient. And they continue to double down. They're growing their staff. They're continuing to do research and development. They actually have 2 campuses here in Fort Collins, the one that you described at the east side of Fort Collins, but they also then have their LeMay campus. Right. And they're employing exactly. And they're employing, upwards of 600 people right here in Fort Collins. Yeah.
And these are high-paying jobs.
They are high-paying jobs. They are engineering, super smart people jobs that blow my mind.
When we're talking about Woodward Governor, we're talking about Microsoft, Intel, Broadcom, AMD, HP. These are not, low-paying jobs.
No, they are not. They are not.
So Fort Collins is becoming, more affluent from that standpoint.
Yes.
There is more disposable income here.
Correct.
I'm also curious though, the startup companies. This is a place that's grown so many, upstart companies. A few of them that get me fired up when I think about OtterBox.
Yes.
OtterBox. The iPhone cases that protect your iPhone. They're the company in that space.
Yes.
Huge employer, huge success story in Fort Collins. Kurt Richardson started, his son is now the CEO. In another one, Madwire Media.
Absolutely.
Another really big one, a digital marketing company.
Correct.
Any others that maybe people don't know about that in your position, let's keep an eye on this one or that one. I'm sure there's more than one, but any that come to mind right away.
Yeah. So Advanced Energy also has maintains, we're now their second headquarters. Their official headquarters is in Denver. Some of that is to keep their sea level super happy about where they live. But Advanced Energy is continuing to employ about 500 people here in Fort Collins.
I didn't know it was nearly that many.
Yes.
That's another one. They're under the radar. Like you said, they're over on Midpoint Drive off of Prospect.
Yes.
You just don't see them. They are not a place. Their name isn't out there, but 500 people. I had no idea.
Yeah. And they've just completed a renovation of their space there. And what I love about companies like Advanced Energy is they are keeping those research, cutting edge, how do we do things better jobs here in Fort Collins. So I'm pretty okay with their marketing department being in Denver because the super smartest jobs are staying right here. And that's when our economy really starts to spin, is when we have those knowledge-based creating solution jobs here in Fort Collins that then inspire that churn of every other dollar from those salaries. It's pretty powerful.
There's such a butterfly effect.
Yes,
right?
yes. Perfect description. Yes.
There really is. So homegrown, so many. I know there are great stats out there about the homegrown companies.
Yes.
So many companies in town that are 10 or fewer employees that
yes.
are growing. I put together a stat. This was like a year and a half ago. I was like, hey, I looked at all the Shark Tank episodes.
Okay.
And if you're listening and if you don't know what Shark Tank is, you should.
Yes.
It's a show on, television, but there's Mark Cuban, former owner, I guess, of the Dallas Mavericks.
Yes.
Other people, they listen to business pitches, ideas. They want to hear from entrepreneurs, startups, and all over the world, people are flying into the studio in California to be on the show and pitch their ideas, pitch their businesses. There have been 4 groups from Fort Collins on Shark Tank over the years.
I love it.
Which is a huge number. A huge number when you consider that this is not Manhattan. This is, this is not Silicon Valley. This is not, these larger places that are just known for churning out entrepreneurs.
Well, I was a part of a conversation just last week where somebody was noting some of the layoffs in Boulder, a handful of layoffs that have maybe been in our area are actually really, really good for our economy because they inspire. In some ways, they force an entrepreneur to figure out that they're an entrepreneur, and they inspire that very localized, I've got an idea and I'm willing to put my time, my money, my energy behind this solution. And here we go. And so while some of those layoffs, some of those downturns are very hard for a community, and I appreciate that completely. But some of the folks that were a part of the conversation were pointing out there's a spark there that happens. There's some value of that to your economy, especially if you've got an entrepreneurial, innovative economy.
Yeah, and that is just here. It permeates.
It does.
Let's go back to the day-to-day a little bit, and we'll wrap this up shortly. But I'm just, people listening to this that excited about Fort Collins, or they live here already. They're just excited about living here, but maybe they haven't lived here that long. What if you have a friend visiting? Let's say, what can they not leave Fort Collins without doing?
Well,
what's that thing you
So I'm classically old school. So any of our guests that come, we have to go to Charcoal Broiler.
I saw your post. Well, it was earlier this week.
Last week I got to sneak in a lunch at Charcoal Broiler. So Charcoal Broiler.
You said it was packed.
It was packed for lunch,
which I read that night. It surprised me that
for lunchtime.
On a weekday for
and
lunch.
And it was shocking for Stan as well, the owner. But Charcoal Broiler has been in Fort Collins for at least 50 years because my parents used to tell stories of them going to the Charcoal Broiler. Back when Fort Collins was dry and the Charcoal Broiler was just outside of city limits. So
just into the county.
Exactly. So you could go and you could have this amazing steak that they hand cut, they aged in their back room. I think their meat cutter has been there for like 40 years. It's crazy town.
So is their sign. Like 40, 50 years. It's the same sign.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they've been around forever, family owned the entire time. And it's just this throwback to that moment of, we really were an ag town, and you can still get an amazing steak with a great cocktail in a space that still has that 70s, 60s vibe.
I'm a dirty martini guy. Is it a good martini there to go with steak?
My choice is their margarita. They have a house margarita that is top notch. Okay. It gives the guys down the street a good run for their money.
Really? Gives the Rio a run for their money.
Yes.
I am sold.
Yes, exactly. Charcoal Broiler.
We'll
lunch or dinner. They also do breakfast on the weekends. Again, just that classic Fort Collins. So that's always a stop.
I love that. That's great.
Secondarily, then I would say anything Colorado State. If we have, again, family or friends visiting, we want to make sure we hit an athletic event. We go and we just took our board on a tour of campus last week, and the buildings and the displays and just campus is so fantastic. Again, just that inspirational moment of, we live here. This is so cool.
I love that. Just being around the energy.
Yes. And then my third thing would be live music somewhere in town.
Where's your favorite place?
Well, it's a tough call. You've got the Magic Rat that has just
Good
music constantly. Really, any brewery in town is going to oftentimes have live music. The Exchange across the street, they'll put some fun stuff on the ground. Or if you want to get adventurous, head up to the swing station in LaPorte.
Great recommendation.
Yes. Or again, more adventure, head up to the Mish. I mean, we're incredibly fortunate to just have a lot of super cool spaces that collaborate with others to make such a great vibe here in Fort Collins.
The last one you mentioned, the Mish, I don't think that's come up with other guests yet, but it's for those listening, it's up the canyon. Everyone talks about Red Rocks. Red Rocks is great.
Yes.
But you need to try the Mish. I remember the first time going there. It's on the raging Poudre River.
Yes.
I mean, the stage is like right
there.
And there were, I guess it was probably deer just running in the background.
It's crazy.
There's wildlife.
Yes.
There's this sweet lady that had the stand that, I mean, it looked like it was just right out of like 1992. And she had, great beer, like New Belgium beer, and served it. And we had a beer. We had a great chicken sandwich, and we just watched the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band.
Absolutely.
And the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. So this is not like just this small group that just doing, this is a group that people are coming from all over to see, but this amazing venue. And people, I don't want to drive up the canyon at night. I get it, kind of scary, but what you can do is go to CSU. You can hop on a bus. They have a whole bus shuttle system. Yes. My wife and I do that. We get together with friends. They give the whole speech on the bus when it's starting out, like, hey, don't smoke marijuana on the bus. Anybody, you're like back in like the field trip days, like you're in high school. But it's a great time, and it's so safe. And then when you're done, the shuttles pick you up. They're just waiting for you, and they take you back down to your car safely. Highly recommend the Mish. Those are amazing recommendations.
And if you don't want to be adventuresome, we've got Washington's, the investment.
Acoustics at Washington's, right? If you want to go fancy, Washington's.
Or the Armory. For those for your listeners that haven't checked out the Armory.
I never have, actually.
Oh my gracious. So owned by the same family that owns Washington's, but an even more intimate space. It's like you're sitting in the musician's living room. It's fantastic. And different kinds of shows at each location. So between Washington's, the Armory, the Rat, and then Odell's and New Belgium, both are so heavily invested in bringing fun music to everyone. Again, we're awfully blessed.
You have fantastic recommendations. You really do. Of everyone that's been on the show, this is, and I suppose I might have predicted that. And what about you? Have some you time? Now you're very busy. You have a stacked calendar. You also have, you have a lot of friends. You're a very well-known person locally. I just wondered, do you have you time? And if there's a day, whether it's a weekday or a weekend day, and the schedule's clear, you can do whatever you want to do. I'm curious, like what does that look like for you in Fort Collins whenever that happens?
That's a tough one because we've kind of hit it all. I'm going to find some good food, which is not hard to find in this town. I'm going to find a great patio, also not hard to find in this town.
Best patio in Fort Collins.
Ooh, that one gets me all the time. Odell's, I really do love what Odell's has created there. Always has a good vibe. But downtown, it's a tough one, because there's so many great patios downtown.
The Rio is one that gets a whole lot of
absolutely.
attention.
Love their back patio there.
That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's some hidden ones too.
Yes.
Equinox.
Yes.
I'm saying that correctly.
Equinox.
Brewery.
Oh, for sure.
You wouldn't even know. You have to walk all the way through
Right.
their tap room and then
Yes.
you get to the back. And you're like, oh,
Get into the alley. Yeah.
This is like amazing secret
It is.
patio
Yes.
that borders one of our refurbished alleys. That's just incredible.
Yes. Yes.
Favorite coffee shop in town, favorite brunch, lunch spot. Let's hit some of those quick quiz. For people listening
Quick
to these,
quiz.
they wanna know.
Favorite coffee shop? I'm actually jamming on Lima right now.
Lovely. No?
They've been doing some special concoctions that I've really been liking, and I don't even drink coffee. So it's like a trick to make me drink coffee and super fun.
They turned you into a coffee drinker.
Exactly. So I love Lima. Brunch, I'm a big back porch fan. So over there near Woodward on LeMay, totally dig them.
Yeah, right around the corner from where most of the breweries are.
Yes. Although downtown Felipe Bistro.
Not been there yet.
Put it on the list. Nighttime, again, maybe your listeners are figuring out I'm a big steak fan. They've got this steak frites item that's available in the evening.
I thought they just had pastries.
No.
I just didn't know this.
Oh no, this is French cooking at its best.
So you got the whole thing.
Oh, if you liked watching Julia Child, you get to see Julia Child executed and eat the food. It's fantastic.
I heard great things about this place, but I didn't know they had this. Okay.
Yeah.
On my list.
Yeah. Definitely put Felipe on the list. Super fun.
Really good one. Great recommendations. I learned a lot. I thought we all think we just know more than we do. This is really fantastic. I had fun.
I did too.
This flew by for me, and I'm glad to hear you had fun as well.
Yes.
So, Ann, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Greg.
Everyone's going to get a lot out of this, and just thank you for your time. Everyone appreciates it.
Oh, I appreciate you. And again, so excited to get to be able to showcase our community to folks that live here, as well as folks that might be thinking about coming here.
Wonderful. And if people want to learn more about the Fort Collins Chamber of Commerce, where should they go?
Go to our website, fortcollinschamber.com. We're on 24/7 and here to stand up for business.
I love it. Thank you so much, Ann.
Thanks, Greg.